Faith and psychology meet perfectly here. What you focus on expands. When you focus on frustration, you amplify chaos. When you focus on peace, you amplify clarity. The mind follows attention like water follows gravity. So instead of thinking what's next, try asking what's now. Because the next step always reveals itself when you're present enough to see it. The shift from burnout to flow isn't about quitting everything. It's about coming back to yourself. It's remembering why you began in the first place. Somewhere behind all the busyness, there was once love. Love for learning, for creating, for giving, for becoming. But when that love gets buried under pressure, the journey starts to feel empty. Flow is simply falling back in love with the process. When you realign with that love, energy returns. It's no longer effort, it's expression. You don't wake up thinking, I have to do this. You wake up feeling, I get to. That small shift changes everything. It's no longer about proving your worth. It's about expressing your truth. Spiritually, this is grace, the energy that moves through you when you stop blocking it. It's the current of life that carries you when you finally stop fighting the flow. You begin to notice divine timing in everything, a delay that protects you, a closed door that redirects you, a detour that introduces you to something better. The peace you once chased now lives inside you. And then one day, without realizing it, you look around and realize you're not going nowhere anymore. You're just moving differently, slower, smarter, softer. You're not driven by anxiety, but guided by awareness. You still work, but it's from purpose, not pressure. You still move, but it's from calm, not chaos. That's the power of alignment. Everything begins to cooperate with you. Life starts to feel lighter because you're no longer swimming against the current. You're flowing with it. And in that flow, you rediscover what doing everything was always meant to feel like: peaceful, purposeful, and free. There comes a point in every journey when you stop asking, when will things finally make sense? And start whispering, maybe they already do. That's when alignment begins. Quietly, invisibly, like sunrise creeping through the cracks of a dark room. You may not even notice it at first. You just start to feel lighter, more present, less desperate to fix everything. You begin to trust that the pauses have purpose, that not every detour is a delay, and that not moving forward doesn't always mean you're falling behind. This is the moment your heart and mind finally start walking at the same pace. The inner chaos softens. You stop measuring life by distance traveled and start valuing depth. You realize that maybe all those seasons when you felt stuck weren't wasted. They were shaping your direction from the inside out. Psychologically, this is what's called cognitive realignment. It's the shift that happens when your internal beliefs and your external actions begin to match. The brain stops sending mixed signals. The stress response quiets. You feel clear, even if the road ahead isn't. That's because peace isn't the absence of uncertainty. It's the presence of trust. And that trust changes everything. You stop demanding to know every step before taking one. You stop fighting for control over what was never yours to control. You start understanding that you don't need to see the whole map to move forward. You just need to see the next right step. That's how clarity works. Not as a floodlight, but as a candle. One small glow at a time. Ask yourself, what if the reason I haven't moved forward is because I've been running in circles around the lesson I refuse to learn? That question stings, but it's sacred. Because every cycle you repeat carries a message you haven't yet heard. Maybe it's teaching you patience, maybe humility, maybe faith. The longer you resist the lesson, the longer you feel lost. But the moment you learn to listen, The path unfolds beneath your feet. Norman Vincent Peale wrote, "When you expect the best, you release the power of the mind toward creation, not destruction." And that's the psychological truth behind faith. When you expect peace, your mind starts building paths toward it. When you expect chaos, it builds walls instead. The brain literally reconfigures itself to match your dominant thought patterns. That's why what you focus on feels so real, because it becomes real to your perception. So when you focus on flow, on the quiet assurance that you are exactly where you need to be, life starts to meet you there. The right people show up, not because you chased them, but because you became still enough to be found. Opportunities align, not because you forced them, but because your energy finally matched what you were asking for. Spiritually, this is where surrender becomes strength. You start realizing that faith isn't about control, it's about cooperation. It's about trusting that you're being led, even when you can't see the direction. You don't pray for answers as much as you pray for alignment. God, make my steps match your rhythm. That prayer changes everything, because alignment is peace disguised as progress. You stop chasing speed and start choosing stillness. You stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. You stop seeing pauses as punishment and start recognizing them as preparation. Life slows down, not because it's losing momentum, but because it's finally moving at the pace of peace. And something else shifts too. Gratitude begins to grow where anxiety used to live. You start appreciating the small things again. The quiet mornings, the way sunlight hits your coffee mug, the laughter that breaks tension. You notice that the things that truly matter have nothing to do with how fast you move and everything to do with how present you are while moving. Ask yourself, what if going nowhere was exactly where I was meant to be to find myself? That's the realization that heals you. The stillness you hated becomes the sanctuary you needed. The waiting that frustrated you becomes the wisdom that guides you. You realize that maybe God didn't want you to go faster. He wanted you to go deeper. Psychologically, you begin to rewire your association with pause. The nervous system stops interpreting rest as danger. You no longer feel guilt for slowing down. You no longer panic when progress isn't visible. Because you understand that growth happens in silence. Seeds don't sprout in noise. They grow in stillness, in the unseen. And spiritually, you finally stop treating life as a race and start treating it as a relationship. You stop striving to get somewhere and start learning to be somewhere. You begin to see that nowhere was never empty. It was sacred space, shaping your soul for the next season. When you reach that point, a deep calm enters you. You stop rushing to catch up with others. You stop needing constant validation to prove your worth. You start trusting your own rhythm, that quiet, unique cadence of your life that doesn't need to match anyone else's. And as you live in that peace, direction naturally appears. You don't have to chase it anymore, because direction is not something you find, it's something you align with. And alignment comes when your spirit, your mind, and your actions finally move together at the same pace toward the same truth. That's when you finally understand what Norman Vincent Peale meant when he said, "Change your thoughts and you change your world." Because when you change how you see your pauses change their meaning. They stop being evidence of stagnation and become signs of transformation. You're no longer doing everything but going nowhere. You're moving slower but deeper. You're not chasing time. You're moving with it. You're not begging for direction. You're walking in it. And maybe, just maybe, The place you once called nowhere was actually the path to everywhere you were meant to go. There comes a moment, quiet, gentle, almost unnoticeable, when you realize that the exhaustion is gone. The constant heaviness in your chest has eased. The noise in your mind has softened into silence. You're still moving, but now it feels lighter. You're still working, but now it feels meaningful. The world around you hasn't changed much. The same streets, the same people, the same responsibilities, but you have. Something inside you has realigned. You've stopped trying to sprint your way into peace. You've stopped believing that success equals speed. You've stopped living as if rest was a sin. And that's when life starts flowing again. Not because you're doing more, but because you're finally doing what matters. You've learned what Norman Vincent Peale meant when he said, "Empty pockets never held anyone back. Only empty heads and empty hearts can do that." You've filled your heart again, not with more goals or achievements, but with faith, clarity, and gratitude. You understand now that motion without meaning is the slowest way to live. That going nowhere is just another word for being lost in noise. You've learned that peace is not a destination, it's a direction. It's the quiet confidence that even when you can't see the full path, you trust the next step, and the next, and the next. You've learned that slowing down doesn't mean you're falling behind. It means you're finally keeping up with your soul. Ask yourself, what if the waiting season wasn't punishment, but preparation for the version of me that could handle what's next? That's the shift. You no longer resent the pause, you respect it. You no longer fight silence, you listen to it. You no longer crave constant motion, you honor alignment. You start to see the divine fingerprints in your detours, the people who entered your life in stillness, the opportunities that appeared after you stopped forcing, the peace that showed up the moment you surrendered control. Psychologically, this is integration. When your beliefs, emotions, and actions move in harmony, it's not about perfection, it's about coherence. You wake up in the morning and your mind no longer runs before your feet touch the ground. You breathe deeper. You start each day not with panic, but with presence. Spiritually, this is trust, the kind that doesn't need proof. You stop praying out of desperation and start praying out of gratitude. You no longer say, "God, fix this," but instead, "God, guide me." You no longer ask for control, you ask for clarity. You no longer plead for direction, you walk in peace, knowing that what's meant for you will always find its way. That's the quiet miracle of alignment. You stop chasing life, and life starts meeting you halfway. Things that once felt impossible begin to unfold with ease. The people who drain you drift away, and the ones who uplift you appear without effort. You realize that what's meant for you doesn't require force, it only requires readiness. And readiness is not about working harder, it's about trusting deeper. It's about letting your faith catch up with your ambition. It's about believing that maybe, just maybe, going nowhere was never a failure, it was divine synchronization. The universe wasn't denying you, it was waiting for you to slow down enough to receive. When you live in that rhythm, your inner life becomes still water, calm, reflective, open. You don't crave chaos anymore, you crave peace. You don't seek validation from speed, you find satisfaction in direction. You're no longer addicted to progress. You're anchored in purpose. That's when you finally understand. Life was never about reaching some distant summit. It was about remembering who you are along the climb. It was about finding joy in the process, meaning in the pauses, and strength in the surrender. Norman Vincent Peale once wrote, The cyclone derives its power from a calm center. So does a person. You found that center now. It's not somewhere outside of you. It's within you, the part that no longer fears stillness, the part that no longer confuses movement with meaning, the part that can finally say, I am where I need to be. You walk slower now, but with purpose. You speak softer, but with conviction. You work quieter, but with intention. And the world begins to mirror that energy back to you. Opportunities open gently, relationships deepen, peace stays longer. You realize that doing everything was never the goal. Being aligned while doing anything was, because alignment turns effort into impact, noise into clarity, movement into meaning. So if you find yourself in that place doing everything but going nowhere, take heart. You're not broken. You're being called home to yourself. Slow down, breathe, realign. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop. Stop trying to rush what's sacred. Stop trying to outrun the lesson. Stop mistaking movement for growth. Stand still long enough to feel God whisper again. And when you do, you'll see it clearly. You were never going nowhere. You were simply learning how to move with purpose. Because when peace leads the way, even the smallest step takes you somewhere infinite.